Before we get there, let's just do a couple quick housekeeping items. Just remember in your little Zoom box there, share, type it so we can see your name. In the chat box, let us know where you're tuning in from. And if I know one thing about Alex's webinars and workshops, it's that you will have a whole lot more to talk about in the chat box as the night is going on. And just to get ready to have some fun tonight. As you all may remember, if you've come to our Startup Grind events before, my name is Raj. I'm one of the co-directors of Startup Grind Chicago, along with Madeline over here. And let's just kind of give you a quick overview on Startup Grind if you are newer to the community. Actually, give me 1 second. I got to pull down the share and then put it back up. When I said 1 second, clearly what I meant was like 14 seconds. Okay, there we go. So quick background on Startup Grind, founded in 2010 out of Palo Alto. It is the largest entrepreneur community in the world. So give yourselves a pat on the back for being part of the largest, the biggest, the greatest community of entrepreneurs in the entire world. Startup Grind Chicago itself was founded back in 2012. We were the 12th chapter overall, which is now over 600 chapters globally. We have 10,000 plus grinders here in the Chicago community. And this is actually our 101st event, Madeline, or our 102nd event now?
102.
This is 102 now. So this is our 102nd Startup Grind in Chicago event. And every year there's Startup Grind Global, which is back and in person this coming February, beginning February 28th in Redwood City, California. If you go to startupgrind.com right now, you can actually check out the information for that multi-day event. It'll be awesome to see people back in person. So check out the information there. It's a fantastic event. I got the opportunity to be a part of the virtual version last year, and it was a ton of fun. Couple housekeeping items and rules of Startup Grind. We always want to give first here. We always want to make friends and ultimately help others. So if there's something, if there's a talent you have that can support someone else, let them know. If you have an ask for help, put that in the chat, and perhaps others may be able to support you in your journey. Use this time to make friends as well. I know we're on Zoom boxes, so it's not as easy as being in person, but always, a great place to just connect with these people in this group on LinkedIn afterwards, and just really be there to support one another in your respective journeys. We stand for inspiration, education, and connection. And October itself represents DEI month for Startup Grind as a whole, which is presented in partnership with Silicon Valley Bank. DEI month is a time for us to celebrate and highlight the globally diverse community here at Startup Grind. So this is just a really good opportunity to recognize underrepresented leaders from all over the world and listen to a lot of incredible journeys. So we've got this going on tonight, but also check out the other Startup Grind chapters who are hosting virtual events, and pop into their events as well and sign up for those too. Big shout out to Silicon Valley Bank for being a partner in DEI month. And on that note, let's just watch this quick little video here.
Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Month is a time to celebrate and highlight our globally diverse community. Join us in recognizing underrepresented leaders from all over the world and listen to these incredible journeys and the new heights they will reach next. DEI Month is presented by Silicon Valley Bank.
Hi, my name is Mara Anyanka, and I'm a Corporate Development Manager based out of the New York office at Silicon Valley Bank. And we are so pleased to sponsor Startup Grind's DE&I month. At Silicon Valley Bank, we bank the world's most innovative companies and their investors. And for nearly 40 years, we've been focused on serving the needs of founders, entrepreneurs, and high-growth technology and life sciences companies. We are deeply committed to supporting initiatives and organizations that accelerate diversity, like Startup Grind, Latinx VC, and Zane Venture Fund. Our own program, Access to Innovation, is focused on building a more diverse, equitable, and accessible innovation economy for all. We really aim to transform lives by building educational, employment, and funding pathways for emerging talent, expanding connections and funding for Black, Latinx, and female founders and investors, and working toward gender parity and diversity in leadership. To learn more about Silicon Valley Bank and the work that we do at Access to Innovation, please visit svb.com and sign up for our newsletter.
Rock on. Madeline, was that your voice on the voiceover at the beginning?
Yes, it is.
I thought it sounded familiar. Awesome.
Diversity,
right.
equity, and inclusion.
Oh no, look at
Month
that.
is
You're coming back on. Okay, everybody. So with that said, I got to give a special warm welcome here to my friend, Alex Batdorf. Alex and I met probably 3-ish years ago. She had just started her company, Get Shit Done, but it was a Gmail address. I think it was getshitdone@gmail.com. And it was like one email that had been sent out. There wasn't a website yet. And I just got the feeling that she was onto something big, because she was just like speaking with so much passion and fire and like conviction behind everything she was doing. And I was like, I think this is going to go places. And then we're only here a few years later, and I think it's going places, and it's already gone places. So I'm honored to call her a friend and someone who's in my network. And I'm honored to be able to have her come to you tonight to talk all about the things that she's an expert in, which is around traction and scaling up a traction strategy. She used to be the CMO of Zipfit Denim and the co-founder of them, a multi-million-dollar backed startup. And she's kind of done it all in the startup landscape. So I will let you take the floor, but in a traditional startup grind fashion, we got to welcome her on. So if everybody could just come off mute momentarily, and on the count of 3, I need you to cheer into your screens as loud as humanly possible. So go ahead and bring yourselves off mute. And 1, 2, 3. Woo! Alex Batdorf!
I think this dismantled any of the naysayers who thought this was a recording, so I think that just fixed that. I think we're good now. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. Yeah, let me get rid of my phone for a moment. It's in true entrepreneur fashion. You're going to learn a little bit about me and the work we do now. This is my 3rd company, and it doesn't matter how many or how successful you are. I almost forgot I had this event until 10 minutes before. So, yay, Q4! For any entrepreneurs out there, you're doing fantastic. You're doing fantastic. All right, so I'm super excited because I love doing this. We could call it our traction class. And Get Shit Done is all about traction. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. We're going to get to know each other, but also heads up, this is going to be interactive. So I'm going to ask people for examples of specific traction goals that you're working on. So don't be scared. And if you act scared, I'm going to have to come into the audience and pick on you. So we're all adults here. I think you got this. So let me share my screen real quick, and we're going to have some fun. All right. It says host disabled screen sharing. Can I get help from the crew?
You'll have to make her a co-host.
Naturally. 1 second, Alex.
Well, while we're doing that, put in the comments one thing you want to celebrate that you've fucking done in 2021 that you're really proud of. It could also be breathing, like you're alive still. That is a really good one. So put in the comments. I want to see what you're celebrating. I think so often as entrepreneurs, and I am a crazy therapist described perfectionist, hyperachieving perfectionist. So sometimes I forget how to breathe through my celebration. So I want to start there on that note. Awesome. So we have bought a house. Yes. Turned 30. Yes. Come on. Welcome to the 30 Club. got a patent granted for 3D printing skyscrapers, come through, had 2 babies, congrats. I can barely take care of myself, amazing. Hired 2 amazing people, somehow expanded the business. Oh my gosh, you all, I'm inspired by you. You can do this presentation. No, I'm just kidding. I have some things I can say. So let's hop in here. I know some shit. So let's hop on in. Can you see my screen?
You.
Yes. Let me get rid of active campaign. Awesome. Well, this is one of my favorite topics because everything we do at Get Shit Done is all about traction. But to start off, what the hell is Get Shit Done and why the hell am I here? So this is Startup Grind Chicago. My roots for my first 2 companies are Chicago based. I built my first 2 companies, spent 10 years in Chicago. I went to undergrad in Chicago at University of Chicago. Go Maroons, if any of you are. Really weird mascot. We suck at sports, so that's why we're a color and not actually an animal or anything like that. I started my first 2 companies there, fashion tech companies. The last was called Zipfit. I've done the self-funded route. I've done the venture capital route. The last company exited in 2019. Really interesting thing, though, that got me to Get Shit Done. We are a collaborative supporting women entrepreneurs in gaining traction to scale generational impact. This is why this is very important to me, and you'll learn more about Get Shit Done later as we're doing this work together. While I was scaling my last company in Chicago, there was 2 loud neighborhoods, really loud narratives happening at the same time. I guess they were in neighborhoods together. The first was, well, look at all these women starting companies. This is so exciting. But for the rooms I was in, I wasn't seeing those women. I'm like, the stats are there, but I'm not seeing these women. Where are the women at? And later I'd find out why. The second loud narrative, it was, well, if women just had investors, all of their problems would be solved. So everybody tell women to go get an investor. And I'm like, that's complete bullshit. And what I would later find out, especially as someone who had raised money and had self-funded before. So I started really digging in, and I wanted to understand what was the primary issue. So as we started getting into it, I'm like, this is interesting. I'm not seeing these women because a staggering stat stood out to me that women entrepreneurs make up nearly half of entrepreneurs, but our companies bring in about 4% of total business revenues. No one talks about that. Everyone loves talking about funding. We say 2%. Most people know the stat 2%. 2% of funding goes to women. That is 2% of less than 1% that goes to anybody. And if there's something I had learned from any of my businesses, whether it's self-funded or whether we had raised capital, was traction just made everything else irrelevant. And here's a fun story that maybe some of you can empathize with. So how many of you have seen this notification from any of your bank accounts? If you have, put yes in the comments. I got it several times for 6 months straight. This is when I was running my VC back company in Chicago. We ended up getting or had a lead investor. The lead said they were going to put in $1 million. Fast forward, they only put in 7%, not 77% of what they said that they would actually put in. Had nothing to do with the business or the business model. They overpromised, underdelivered. Now, what does that end up resulting in? A lot of investors see that as a red flag. They end up pulling out. And we end up having to Airbnb out our places. My co-founders and I at the time, moving in with partners. Thank goodness we could do that. Not Airbnb, but Bank of America sent me this notification probably almost every day for 6 months to remind me how broke I was. But this was one of the worst things and best things that ever happened to me as an entrepreneur. Fun fact I just learned like last weekend, the average entrepreneur goes bankrupt 3.8 times. And knock on wood, I've never been bankrupt, but that was very staggering stat to me. So yes, you all are doing wonderful. Just remember that. So this kicked our asses into high gear. Why? We had many times where we were running out of runway and it was do or die. What this got us focused on was focusing on our business model instead of what we hear in the space all the time. Go get that check. That signals success. What I hear so often now, whether you're male or female entrepreneurs, is that leads founders relying on external resources in order for their companies to work. And I still see that they don't have good business models. A check only means you're going to need another check, but a good strategy means you can pull yourself out of it. So we started pulling ourselves out of it by going ham. You all are in Chicago, or a good chunk of you are in Chicago. We were an e-commerce company. So we were specializing in denim. We had to take all of our stuff out of our showrooms, put it in an unheated storage during one of the worst polar vortexes in Chicago's history. And anytime someone went and put an order in on our site, we'd have to go in that crazy cold storage unit and pull it out one by one. And then we were like, okay, this is not sustainable. What are some other ways? So we started getting really crafty around, well, how can we distribute more? How can we expand our distribution? How can we get more customers at once? Because we can't invest in online ads, right? So we started brainstorming, started coming up with really great traction tactics. And then we just started seeing things growing and growing and growing and growing. And the amazing thing is I remember, I'm based in New York now, but one of our VCs out of here who had already put their check in and they had wrote us off. I remember he probably cursed us out for an hour straight when the initial thing happened. He actually came back and saw our numbers and he was just like, I didn't think you guys could pull this off. And he personally, as a managing partner at that fund, put in his own check. This is why traction is so freaking important. And for those of you thinking, okay, what's traction? I'm pretty sure you all know this, but just as a brief overview, traction can look a few different ways depending on the type of company you're building. So revenue is always top. But let's say if you're like some of our founders who are not necessarily focusing on the revenue piece right now, and it's more of a marketplace and a user network, then they're looking at how do we increase users. Increasing MRR, monthly recurring revenue, goes back to revenue, increasing your retention rates, average order values, developing technology. Those are all things that signal traction. And whether you're fundraising or not, it is a great space to be in when you are an entrepreneur to start seeing that momentum on your own, because the reality is nobody owes you a check. So building a really awesome business model is so important. And since we focus on this at Get Shit Done, which led me to this, after seeing and experiencing that in my former company, I ended up resigning maybe a year and a half before the company exited. And I was really obsessed with this specific thing. I wanted to see, well, how can we help more women get beyond the 4%? And one of the ways to do that is through traction. And so by doing that, through our accelerator, through our community, through our programs, our founders have been able to see fantastic traction. And we've been doing it for almost 2 years now. So we're going into our 7th cohort on next week, 2 weeks from now. Super excited. And our founders have killed it. They're fully distributed across the world. We are over 50% women of color, which I'm really proud of, especially as a woman of color. That was the most important thing. And we've seen them 25x revenue and put 2.5 million in the pipeline. And this is someone actually, Naseem Abdi, she was in Chicago at some point. She's in Indiana. She actually just raised her seed round of $1 million. As an Iranian woman, there's founders who are securing 100,000 in pre-sales revenue, increasing users 222%, so on and so forth. So I will keep basically banging over your head that traction is the most important thing. I will go hard in the paint on traction any day, because I get tired of founders talking about checks, and I'm like, you don't have anything to show for that check. So long story short, fuck 4%. That's what we say, because we want to get more women through the pipeline to growing sustainable companies that can scale. But that also goes for you. This is not just a woman's issue, it's everyone's issue. But you should also, whatever you identify as, care about traction. So that's what we're going to dive into today. This is going to help you kind of think through, how do you move from surviving and stuck to thriving? We hear that verbiage a lot from founders. Help you get focused on your 80-20. Many of you have probably heard of this, the Pareto principle. If you haven't, it's basically across, whether it's weight loss, whether it's business activities, there's always 20% of your activity that produces 80% of your results. And then helping you get very good at measuring. This is something we see founders trash at. And it's not your fault. People just don't talk about it, and it's usually seen as scary. So helping you get really granular so you can optimize and scale out the right things. There we go. Awesome. And then these are just a couple things that we're going to hit on. We're going to walk you through some of the frameworks we use with our founders to help them hit those goals, help them get really focused on increasing revenue, whatever their traction goals are. We're going to walk you through some of the frameworks we use to help founders. So without further ado, because I can talk about traction all day, if you're ready, put "let's ready to work" in the chat and we'll get to work here. And then quick reminder, as I go through some of this, I'm also going to ask some of you for your own personal examples so we can do this in real time together. So this is kind of a mock copy of the traction tracker we use with our founders. If you're familiar with OKRs, you pretty much have the gist of this. Our frameworks are a little bit more on steroids. And this is probably a really old version. There's many new versions of this that our founders use internally that we're developing into our personal app. But this is kind of the gist of how we get them super, super focused. So I'm just going to quickly go over how to think through this when you're coming up with your traction strategy to stay super, super focused. If there's 3 things we've noticed of founders who scale successfully, it's ability to get focus, listening to your customers, and measurement. Those 3 things, hands down, that's your secret sauce, those 3 things. So this is going to help you break those things down, get focus, know what to listen about, and then also know what to measure. So we always start with your North Star. Why is this super important? It's really easy when we're building companies, especially when I see the ones crash and burn or the founders end up getting thrown under the bus. Let's look at the WeWorks of the world, right? You start with a really grandiose vision, and I think has really good intention to start with. I see where founders go off the grid is when they forget why they started the company in the first place, and they might get caught up in the hoopla of startups. Let's just grow for growth's sake and break shit. Breaking shit is not the best thing. Throwing shit at the wall, I hate that saying. When it has no intention, it helps nobody. So your North Star helps you to get centered, hold you accountable. Why are we doing what we do? And return to this every single day. So then you don't have shiny object syndrome where you start developing or going into spaces and rolling out things that don't really matter, that feel like, ooh, it can be a nice little pick me up, but it actually is more of a distraction than anything else. The next thing is defining your North Star metric. This is super important in terms of how do you quantify success, right? So if we say they're probably not the greatest example right now because they are being a little trashy, but Facebook, when Facebook started, the intention was really, really good. They started with, they wanted to be North Star, the place that help people connect with their friends and long lost connections. The way they measured that initially, and that's changed today because now they're more focused on engagement since everybody and their mom and grandma, probably mom and grandma now are on Facebook. They measured that by the 7 people rule. So some of you maybe have heard of this, that when someone brought someone else onto the platform, if they would invite at least 7 people, then they knew it was sticky with that person. That person was going to stay on the platform. So I'm sure you all know your North Stars. Just that's where we always start, the most important thing. Then your year goal. This is stuff that's actually about the business. Your North Star metric, that has nothing to do with business performance. And that's actually where founders get in trouble when you make it about your business performance. It's about what's the impact this company is going to have. So now when you get to the goals, these are actually about business performance. So you probably already have this end of year goal. Let's say 2021, maybe it's hit $500,000. Okay, great. Now, end of quarter goal. So let's say maybe you already have 300K you've booked this year. So that means by the end of this quarter, you need to get to 200K to end this year at that $500,000. Awesome. Now, when you look at everything down here, many of you have probably heard about big rocks, little rocks. Everything pertaining to this sheet is quarterly. So to help you get super focused, because one thing that I think of that my mentors always tell me is like, Alex, you need to get over this mountain in order to get to the next. It's very hard as entrepreneurs. We're visionaries. We can touch it, see it, feel it, smell it. And it feels so close that we are trying to jump to that thing before we get there. And then we hit our face on the ground because that doesn't work. So we have to break things out in order to get to what we can see so vividly. So that's why everything below here is for 3 months. You're just breaking out what your goal is and saying for this particular quarter, and for many of you, Q4 is probably, especially like if you're in e-commerce, Q4 is fantastic. So you probably want to boost it up a little bit. So a lot of our founders who are in consumer, they usually attribute a little more than other quarters in Q4, but it helps you to get really granular and focused. And so one analogy I give is, if let's say your end of quarter goal is a meal. So let's say Thanksgiving's coming up. This is your Thanksgiving meal. Now, all these objectives down here are the dishes that make up your meal. So in my family, Thanksgiving, there are key dishes, and whatever your favorite dishes for Thanksgiving, put it in the chat. Mine are like collard greens, mac and cheese, cornbread. If those things are not at Thanksgiving for our total meal, it's a bust. That doesn't make the meal for me. So that's how you think of this, is if end of Q4 goal is to hit 200K, each of these dishes need to attribute to making that up. All of the activities you're doing down here need to add up to that. And then when you look at these measurable key results, these are basically the ingredients you need for that meal or for that dish. So for example, if I do collard greens, I know I'm gonna need ham hock. I know I'm gonna need the actual collard greens. I know I'm gonna need veggie broth. I know I need the spices. That adds up to all of these things. The nice thing about this is that it helps you stay accountable. It helps you stay super, super focused, because what we can do as founders sometimes without bad intentions is we have a lot of busy work going on, and it's easy to get distracted because we're doing everything and we're everything to everybody. And this helps not only you, but your team visually see, instead of you having to tell your team, like, don't bother me with that right now because that's not going to help us get to this bag. They'll see, you know what? I probably shouldn't reach out to Raj about, let's say, a podcast episode for something, when I know that these are our pillars right now that are going to help us hit our 200K. And so not only does it help you manage your team very well, it helps you to manage, because let's face it, as CEOs and founders, we're glorified project managers. That's just comes with the job. So this helps us be the best glorified project managers we can be and help our team navigate to the ultimate goal. Now, let's go into some examples. And this is where I want to chat with all of you and get some of your examples that we can put in here so we can see it in action. So this is a made up company of like a collection of different companies from our tribe of founders that get shit done. So their North Star was, we're going to be the #1 platform connecting kick-ass queens to be inspired in their daily lives. Awesome. How do we measure what success looks like? Number of women connected. Okay, cool. Maybe they have some matching algorithm. Who knows? End of 2021 goal. Theirs was, well, we want to achieve 100,000 annual recurring revenue for them through ticket sales, and they're going to connect 500 queens, because that goes back to how they measure success. And for this quarter, that should be end of Q4, but you get the gist. For this quarter, they've already bought in 70,000 for the year. They have a sprint of 30,000 they need to bring in by the end of this year, by the end of this quarter, in order to hit that goal for the rest of the year. So they're saying, well, 30,000 that's coming through ticket sales and connecting queens. The KPIs, I skipped over this, but really important in order for you to see, well, how do we measure success for each of these objectives that we have? So for each of these dishes, what are they attributing to the overarching goal? And if there are other things that you'll see when we go through the rest of this that are a good indicator of what success looks like. So for this company, it's also average order value, because maybe they're like, well, you know, if we don't sell as many tickets, but we get someone to per individual, but get someone to buy multiples, that's also success, right? Retention rates good, big for them, so on and so forth. You don't need to OD on metrics. It's just the ones that help you keep a pulse on your company. For founders, it's, you know, for any company, it's usually around revenue, depending if you're pre-revenue users. But if you're revenue producing, you also want to look at things like profit margins. Profit margins is one of the sexiest things any company could look at. So I want to bang that in your head. Put profit margins, whatever you're doing. Always track that. And it just depends on the type of company. We'll always also go over the different types of KPIs. And this is something that Startup Grind will share with you all, so then you can make your own copy and follow along. And actually, while we're doing this, let me just put this in the chat so you all can do it now. Yes, awesome. So with this company, let's start with one example for them. They said objective 1 is we're going to secure 10 distribution partners by, and don't mind these dates, we do this so many times. So this was done in Q1 as well. So just think of it's, let's say November 30th. And that's going to bring in 5,000 for them. Wonderful. That's one dish of the meal. Now 25,000 of that dish, that means 25,000 left for the rest of the dishes that need to make it up. But for this one, 5,000's coming, and what do they need to do? What are the ingredients? The first thing is they need to research who the potential partners are. You will realize, and we notice some of our founders get really annoyed with us, and it's funny because we will talk to our friends who are managing directors at like the Techstars and Y Combinator, and they're like, oh yeah, our founders get really pissed off when we make them break all this down. But there's a reason we make you do this. It's because founders, again, we're big thinkers, and sometimes we will underestimate how long things actually take. You're like, oh, I can shoot out all those emails to distribution partners, easy. What we don't think about is, well, we have to research who those people could be. That takes time. We need to create a list. We also need to reach out. Another thing that probably needs to be in here is we also need to come up with the verbiage we're going to use. That takes time too. All those little things add up. And the reason we force founders to do that is it starts helping them to adjust their expectations in terms of what they can actually realistically hit. Because they'll be thinking, oh, easy, we can get that done tomorrow. And then they end up becoming very overwhelmed, or they are hard on themselves because they didn't even give themselves a good running start. So it just helps you break down expectations, hold yourself accountable, but also give yourself a little grace, because shit takes time, y'all. Especially, we've been like in cabin fever, like give yourself grace. This is really important. So that's one of the dishes. Now, the other thing for them was, well, we know ticket sales have done well for us. We're going to drive ticket sales by getting it in front of 10 influencers. And what I love about this company, they broke it down even more granularly. They said, and this is why AOV is up there for them, is, well, the goal is not just 10 influencers. What's the expectation by getting it in front of 10 influencers? That means we want to see 1,000 per influencer with an average order value of $125. That means 8 orders per influencer. The coolest thing when we do this with Get Shit Done Queens is when we break it down this way, they might think, oh shit, 10,000 feels big, depending on what stage in your company you're on. But if you're an early stage founder, you might be like, ooh, 10,000 feels really big. I don't know if we can hit that. But when you break it down this way and saying, wait, if we got in front of 10 influencers and 1,000 per, and then they only need to sell 8, that doesn't feel as scary. We can really get there. So breaking it down that way and quantifying as much as you can in terms of how you measure success is really going to help you not tear out your hair. This is very, very easy as a founder to want to crawl up in a ball and curl up in a ball anytime because you feel overwhelmed. And it's usually because we're putting too much on our plate and not really digging in and putting energy behind something, and also creating expectations around what success can be, so then we can optimize along the way. So for this one, they said, okay, very similar. You're going to notice a lot of these steps, a lot of these ingredients are very, you can kind of recreate depending on if it's similar strategies. You just recreate. Again, they're there to hold you accountable for how much time things take. And also, when you share this with your team, the cool thing is you can say, okay, let's say Sally was responsible for this. Tommy was responsible for reaching out to the influencers, so on and so forth. You can see whoever, maybe you even add like a column for team. This is our really older template of this, but you can attribute, let's say this is Sally's job, this is Tommy. Now, when your team comes together, like let's say Monday morning meetings, you can say, okay, well, where are we on that progress? Maybe Sally's at 30% and this thing was supposed to be due on Monday. Now you have accountability and can say, Sally, what's going on? And maybe even before Monday came, let's say it was Friday and Sally's still at 30%. You can say, whoa, Sally, what's going on? How can I help you? And Sally might say, oh my God, this list is taking much longer than I expected. Because sometimes our team wants to do really, the intention is they want to do really good work for us, but then they try to like be savior and then it just gets bigger. So this helps you to hold them accountable too, saying, you know what, this is a team effort. Awesome. So you can also use this with your team. Highly recommend. And very similar to above. So you want to reach out to those folks. You want to convert X% by a date. You want to gift the actual influencers, give them the tickets so that they can give it to their community or do the giveaway. You want to share, let's say maybe there's a discount. And then by that date, March 30th, in this case, let's say November 30th, you want to achieve those ticket sales by that date. You all get the gist. And then I won't go through this in general, but so far this team that made up 15,000. They now have 15,000 left. Their last thing was, we are going to launch a drip campaign to nurture our current customers. Because let's say maybe they have a pretty big campaign. Similar, they broke it down. They said, we want to drive $15,000 in ticket sales from our existing base. And let's say the AOV is going to be higher because this group of people already really likes us. And when they broke it down and actually said, well, what does 15,000 of that AOV, so 155 divided by 15,000, that's only 97 orders. That's not bad. It feels really, really attainable. So I want to do a couple of examples with you, what you're currently working on. KPI Tracker, this is something you can basically copy and paste whatever KPIs that you currently have. And each week you can use this with your team and say, okay, Sally, Tommy, Jesse, where are we at? Who was responsible for each one? And then this also helps you all to stay hyper focused on measuring what matters and keep your meetings very, very tight. Because if there's something I can't stand as a leader is unnecessary meetings. And I'm sure we're all zoomed the fuck out. So don't be that CEO where you make people come to meetings and they don't care about most of it, because 50% doesn't even matter. So this helps you to stay accountable. One more thing before we go into your personal examples. Here's just a couple of examples of KPIs. Again, you do not need to use all these. Also, some of these don't even relate to if you're B2B versus B2C. Just pick a couple that matter the most for your company. So let's actually go and do a couple examples with folks in the audience. Feel free to unmute yourself, but I want to do an example of, let's say, what your end of quarter goal is, and you can quantify however you want. If you don't want to share revenue, you can do number of users or number of customers. And then whatever the objective is, we're going to go through one of those objectives. So who is going to be the brave soul? Which actually, this is a great exercise to do together. So who wants to jump on in? I will
And
pick.
if no one jumps in, Alex will pick someone.
I will absolutely pick someone. Okay, let me look at people's faces. All right, let's see here. Let's go with, I'm gonna go with Lindy Mitty. Is that it? Is that Lindy Mitty? Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Hi,
And
Lindy. How are you? Where are you based out of?
I'm in South Africa.
Yes.
And
Wow. It is either really late or really early for you.
very early, but it's Friday, so it's okay.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Awesome. Happy Friday. Well, Lindy, this is going to be a fun exercise we're going to do together. So tell me a little bit about your company.
Okay, so we are called Fortress Biohacking, and we're just starting out, so we don't have any traction at all.
Oh,
And
that's
we are
okay. We'll do
currently-
pre-traction. That's cool.
Okay, cool. So we are currently at like product discovery phase, if that's even how you say it in the States. But
Ye-
we are trying to figure out what to sell because we are an e-commerce company of selling electronics, and then we wanted to move into, because we noticed that in electronics a lot of smart trackers sell, so we wanted to get into the health space and do it with supplements. So that the idea with biohacking is that you kind of become your own doctor. And so we got into this program where we've got funding to build an app and basically onboard people on the app, but it's going to be e-commerce.
Okay. So let's start with your end of quarter goal for the business. Even if it's pre-revenue, what do you want to achieve by the end of this quarter, by the end of this year for the company? What would success look like?
At least, let's say 10, 10 people signed up on our app.
Okay, cool. That's good. That's good. So get 10 people to sign up for app. Awesome. So let's go down to your first objective. So if we're going to get 10 people, I'm sure there's probably a couple of different strategies you and your team have been thinking through. What's one of the top ones you're going to focus on in order to acquire 10 people to sign up?
So we like to party, and so we were just going to go to a party and with a QR code and get 10 people, random people, to
Oh my goodness.
download our app.
You speak my language. I love to party. Okay. So what type of party? So you're going to go to a party, let's say what is this party? Like, is it a conference? Is it like a random party? Like, is it just like, let's say maybe go to one party by, let's say December 1st.
Yes.
Cool. Have you already, let's say, just for the sake of this, let's say you haven't even figured out what the party is, and then give me an idea of like, who are your target customers? Because this will probably determine what party you'd go to.
So the type of parties that we go to are outdoor trance parties. The people are already experimenting with supplements. And so the first party would be a trance party outdoor festival.
Okay. So let's just say, for the sake of this, you don't know which one you're going to go to yet. So let's say research, maybe 10 outdoor trance parties. Did I put this right? Is that how you say it?
That's right. That's correct.
Okay. I haven't been to Burning Man in 2 years, so I feel like my hippies a little rusty. Okay. Research 10 outdoor trance parties. Okay, awesome. Maybe we'll do 20. Make a list of 10 trance parties to attend. I'm gonna bump you up to 100 because I feel like we're gonna be at a party. Honestly, if people are on happy substances, they will probably sign up. Awesome. So let's say we're going to research 20. We're going to make a list of 10. And then we are going to book tickets for, let's say, 3 outdoor trance parties. You can also add to this, easy for those of you tuned in, just add more. And then you can say, sign up 30 new users per party, let's say. Actually, we need to boost it up a little bit. You know, just for rounding purposes, we'll say 90. But I still think you should do 100. Sign up for 30 new users per party, just so the math comes together. I don't want to have to do decimals. Sign up 30 new users per party by December 1st. Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Lindy. I thought that's a great example. So that's basically how you will break out your dishes from your meal. In this case, Lindy didn't need too many objectives, but for those of you who are moving and grooving, have been doing this a little longer, you're probably saying, okay, I might need to, let's say, be back to the example of 100K by the end of the year. We need to put in 30,000 by the end of this quarter. So you want to break it down by what objectives are going to help us get there. The thing that I don't want you all to do, where we see founders go OD on this and then get overwhelmed, is when you start getting overwhelmed, it's because you put too many damn dishes on here to make up a meal. So in this case, when that happens, my grandmother is not happy because that means she needs to clean up all of the leftover shit. In this case, for founders, when you have so many dishes that have to make up your attribution for the end of the quarter, the problem becomes you're overwhelmed. You only have so many resources to get it done. So just because you fill your plate doesn't mean you can eat it all. I know many of you have caught this before. In the Black community, we call it the itis, is when you have gone OD and then you just get exhausted. So don't do that to yourself. This is definitely a marathon. So there's going to be sprints within it, but you need to be able to fuel up. Adding a ton of dishes will not help you. So that goes back to your Pareto principle. 20% of your activity makes up 80% of your results. Dive into those. What are the pillars of your business that can really move the needle if you put energy behind them? That doesn't mean you have to put all your eggs in one basket. And even when you're testing, you need to test a few different things. Test quickly and measure everything. That's why having KPIs is so important. So you can say, those Facebook ads, trash, that didn't work, turn it off by this date. We already did a test. I see that too often when founders just keep things on. They're like, oh my God, look at these ads these sales we got from Facebook ads, but then they weren't measuring. Look at, you just spent $100 or you spent $300 to get 100 in return. That's not good unit economics. So measure everything. And this holds you accountable to breaking things down and staying focused on what's working. And also, let's say if something doesn't work, you can see this holistically. Well, why is it not working? Did we do all we can? And if something is working, well, let's go hard on that thing because it's yielding the results. Amazing. So the other thing on here, just for those of you, and I want to create time for you to ask questions if you have any, is if you haven't, the book Traction, it's the baby blue one with red. Highly recommend. It is very skimmable. It goes through different traction channels. We break down every one that they talk about here. Love it. I highly recommend it for any founder that is just trying to think out of the box. It also reminds me of Blue Ocean Strategy, where she is like, instead of trying to compete on the same things in your industry, swim out. And the cool thing about breaking down these different traction channels, it allows you to think outside of the box where players in your vertical might not be going. So I'm actually the most inspired, even though I'm in the startup space, I'm the most inspired by sports and entertainment. I don't get the most inspiration from the startup space because everyone's usually doing the same thing. So this is a great way to say, ooh, here's what I can play with. Now, this is a great exercise you can do that we have our founders do. One of my favorite founders, Mona Bajor, who is the founder of Jor. Fun facts, she's a solo female founder that raised a Series C. Incredible. They built the largest wholesale fashion marketplace to date. So she, in her book, Startups and Downs, which I love, really readable. You can go through it in like no time. She says one of the biggest failures for founders, which they echo in the Traction book, is when they have a bad go-to-market strategy, especially when you're early stage. Founders are typically, there's one thing about getting super focused, but if you haven't kind of experimented with a few different things, it's really, really hard to know what's going to work and not. So I don't want you to go to the complete other end where you're just saying, we're just going to rely on Facebook ads, which please, 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 please don't do that. We talked to one of our comrades, amazing agency the other day, and they actually said that founders should not be investing in ads until they're at 30,000 monthly recurring revenue. So I personally believe that. Happy to debate that out, but at another date. But where we see founders investing all of their resources in one thing when they're so early, and then that thing doesn't work, especially with ads where they give you the okey doke because they give you those conversions and then the CPC just keeps going up. You want to own your traction channels and use the ones you don't own as ways you can complement. So this allows you to take those traction channels here and break them down granularly and think outside of the box. Of 19 different traction channels, what we have our founders do is we say, come up with at least 2 traction tactics per traction channel that you could do. This does not mean you go and do all those things. What it does is it challenges your team to think of all of these different things we could be doing. We're not sitting ducks. We can go through all of these, and it's a cool exercise because let's say, for example, companies that are e-commerce, they might say, well, why would we want to do offline events? Or let's say one of the other things are conferences, so trade shows. So let's say if it's an e-commerce company, they're like, we sell products online. Like, why do we need to go to a trade show? And by thinking outside of the box, it could come and show you some interesting and low cost acquisition strategies because you're not putting so much pressure on it working for your company at that point. An example of this, I feel bad for it. I always forget his name. Sarah Blakely's husband. It reminds me of Alexis Ohanian. He is like, I will be a billionaire and people will still remember me as Serena Williams' husband. So that's how I think of Sarah Blakely's husband. Poor guy. If you know his name, let me know in the comments or in the chat. But he did something really, really genius. He ended up going to a trade show for his company and he didn't buy tickets to the trade show. Instead, what he did was he went to the bakery next to the trade show for the company he had at the time, which was not really trade show focused. That wouldn't usually traditionally be a good channel for them. But he wanted to talk to the people at the trade show that could be customers. But he's like, going in the trade show doesn't matter. So how do I get meetings with these people? There is a high traffic cafe near the trade show that he went to. And he ended up buying out all the baked goods there. So then when people started coming in, he would say, hey, would you like, because they were looking for the baked goods and they were already sold out and it was like 8 a.m. And then he would see them looking at the little container and say, well, hey, would you like a baked good? And the person's hungry and probably cranky that they have to go to this trade show anyway. And they'd be like, oh my God, yes. He's like, I will totally give it to you for free if you just sit down with me for 10 minutes to chat. Genius strategy, like genius. I don't know. Maybe he was Ben and Jerry's did and like got high and thought about it. I don't know. But when you put less of the pressure on you for that channel to work, we see founders come up with some of the dopest ideas for getting traction in different channels that they might not have thought about before because they're so fixated on how other people in their vertical are doing it. And this gives you an opportunity to see how could you stick out. And maybe it's not right now, but let's say, which a lot of traction channels do, let's say you get to a point where one is starting to dry out a little bit and you need to complement it with some newness. And so you're saying we have some space now and energy we can shift over. That thing is now able to be on repeat by itself. And one last thing is to help you again stay super, super, super freaking focused is, let's say your team's saying, well, we want to add a new traction channel, but we want to stay accountable to not just doing to do and growing to grow. We want to be intentional about growth because we only have so much time, energy, and resources. This is a great way to show you impact. So an example is you can put up here, what are already the things you're doing and what do you feel the impact's having? This total score is total impact pretty much. So let's say there's new opportunities we want to pursue, but instead of just hopping into it, let's have a conversation as a team and give it a score. So let's make it less emotional and put logic behind it. So that's how we say, A, what was the ease of implementation? And the harder it is, it's going to be a 1. And then what's the potential impact? The most impact you think it will have gets a 5. Let's say if it's top, it's a 5. So these folks said, we want to produce one of those quizzes that people take and they have to put in their emails to produce leads. That's an amazing way as a lead generator. Well, it's wonderful. The impact is probably going to be a 5. I would challenge that. And the ease of implementation, though, because we don't really have a tech team, we would have to outsource that. That's probably going to be a 1. So that's probably at a 6. Now, business development, though, we could create partnerships with 10 companies. Ease of implementation, that's not that hard. We can just use our team and our big mouths and get on the phone and send out some emails. It's pretty cool. Potential impact, that's a 5. Put you at a 9. Now that helps you and your team say, which one are we going with? The one that scores the highest. So I'm going to unshare my screen and I want to provide some time for any of you to ask questions directly about what you saw. If you have questions, particularly about any of your current traction strategies, we are almost at the end of 2021. Woohoo for us, we made it. But happy to answer any questions about what I covered, go into deeper. If you have specifics around your current strategy, happy to talk through that too.
Alex, I got a question for you. What's your advice for, because I'll tell you, one of the things I come across in all the pitch decks that I work on is particularly for pre-revenue startups, is they will say, when I'll ask them about like go to market, they'll just kind of say like, oh, social media. And their answer kind of ends there and they don't really have much to say beyond that. Can you take that example and like help that kind of founder like dial that in beyond just the blanket phrase social media?
Yes. So that's why breaking it down to the dish and then or the meal and then the dishes. Because let's say if you're saying social media, well, what about social media? The first thing is you need to quantify social media and give it context because that's so big. That could be ads, that could be organic, that could be anything. So that's not really a strategy. That's a blanket statement of that's a channel. So I would say for anyone thinking through that, it's first, well, what specifically on social media, what are you expecting from it? And then how are we attributing it? And then the other thing I would say where overwhelm comes is there might be, let's say maybe their full strategy is acquiring, maybe if we broke that down, they want to acquire, like Lindy, let's say they want to acquire 1,000 leads through social media by a certain date. Great, that's the dish or that's the meal. Now, if you break down the actual dishes within that meal, it's saying, well, we need to get 1,000, but you have to break out LinkedIn from Instagram, from Twitter, and each of those will be their own dishes to make up that 1,000. And you need to break them down differently because you have to approach them all differently. So for founders that are approaching it that way, or any type of channels that way, it's giving it context, saying, well, what are we expecting from it? How do we quantify what success looks like? And then how do we attribute it to different activities within that umbrella? So if it is to acquire 1,000 leads through social media, then it's saying we're going to acquire 250 from Instagram. We're going to acquire 500 from LinkedIn because we know we kill it there. And then the rest we're going to get from Twitter. And then each of those will have its own ingredients for how you're going to make that happen.
Awesome. Thank you. If you have questions for Alex, you can either put them in the chat or you can come off mute and ask directly. Otherwise, I can keep going with more questions or comments. One thing I'll kind of add to this too is, like, remember how you said before you were like, you like to look at like sports and entertainment as a kind of an inspiration source, and I'm wired similar to that. One of the things, just even in carrying that through, that I will look at, so like one of my traction strategies is content partnerships, and specifically doing like workshops or webinars in partnership with other communities and teaching their audience. But taking the entertainment idea, the way I like make it more fun is I look at it, I'm like, what's my tour schedule this quarter? Right. So I'm going on tour and I'm speaking to the Get Shit Done community this Tuesday, but then this Thursday I'm going over to, whatever, this startup hub over here, and I'm going to talk to them. And to me, it makes it more fun when I build this out and I say, hey, look, I'm like a musician on tour, and these are just the different dates and tour stops along the way.
Yep, exactly. And then you can even say, which I know you already think through this, is that's a great strategy. Like, same thing. My team's like, Alex, anytime someone asks you to speak, as long as it's in alignment with what we do and our mission, our vision, they're like, get your ass up on that stage, because we know every time I open my big mouth, some reason we get people who want to come join our mission. So that helps us to say, we're going to put energy behind, okay, Alex goes on tour. Great. But if Alex is going on tour, it's one thing to say, we're going to build awareness, but what does that look like? How can you quantify awareness? I would say that was one of the best things I learned from having a VC backed company, is our investors hit us over the head with that. Is like, fuck your organic. What does that mean? They're like, give me numbers. And that taught me to be like, okay, cool. So maybe you can't necessarily attribute it directly to how many people are going to go straight to the website. You can measure lift, but also let's say you have when you're speaking somewhere, going on a podcast, you know when that thing's going to release. And then you can say, ooh, given a certain time frame from that day to maybe 3 days out, did we see up or down? And then were we able to give them a certain link? And then we can say, we want to be able to get X amount of new leads from this, and then convert X% of those leads. So then my team knows Alex isn't just going to talk and blab, but it's actually intentional blabbing.
Right. One of the things, actually, I wrote about this a couple of months ago. I ended a partnership with one hub because they would only allow me to do my workshop if I changed the name. And they also would not give me any sort of like access to like the attendees afterwards. And so I'm like, okay, so this is not going to produce results, because it's asking me to give my time in exchange for hope.
Yeah.
And probably the biggest drum I've been beating this year is hope is not a strategy.
Hope is not a strategy. And what we tell our founders, inspiration don't pay bills. So it's great to be inspired, but you got to get activated. So if we say that to our founders, activation is just as much. So that's a great strategy in terms of going on tour. But I would say, like, for founders, when you're thinking of things like social media, PR is another one. It's really hard to measure, but it's impactful. It's saying, if we are going to invest in sending out things to Harrow, well, what are we expecting in return, right? It's really important to quantify what success looks like. And that's where we see founders, it's usually really, that piece is missing. It's the quantification.
Perry had a question, I think, for you personally around specifically your opinion of the clothing industry now. But Perry, why don't you come off mute and maybe just kind of fine tune that question a little bit more?
Hey, how you doing, young lady? We met like some years ago. If you check your Facebook inbox, I'm not on Facebook much, but I remember us being friends. But if you check
Oh,
it,
I am not on Facebook. That's why. So, hello,
yeah,
Perry.
we had a conversation in passing because you said some shit to me that threw me off. Though it was a lot of curse words, and I appreciate that because I curse a lot when I get an opportunity to. But you was like, man, what the fuck you waiting on?
Yeah, that sounds
And
like
at,
me.
and at the time, I was going through a divorce, and I became a single parent. And we didn't have an opportunity to go through all of that. But you was like, man, what the fuck you waiting on? And I'm passing. I'm like, let me get back on the train before I miss my train. And then I realized I had a meeting at a local restaurant. I'm like, you know what? I just want to drink and get fucked up.
Mm,
And your words stayed in my head like the whole week. And so I was transitioning from another business and just kind of getting rid of partnerships. And your head stayed in my mind. And I don't know if you remember, you talked about your parents.
mm-mm.
You talked about interracial relationships and them being a couple, and your father being in the army and him passing, and the look on your face. I was like, she's definitely a daddy's girl. And your words, I mean, our conversation it wasn't even 20 minutes, but you
Mm.
gave me so much of yourself until this day. I appreciate it. When I see your name, it makes me smile because I'm like, this is a woman that made no excuses to do everything that she's done thus far.
I
But just
appreciate that, Perry. Are you in the
but just
clothing industry?
yes, I am.
Got it.
Um
So
we
I appreciate that and I receive that. For what you're focused on in the clothing industry right now, in terms of my thoughts on it, what are you thinking about in terms of how you're thinking about the clothing industry, like in terms of that question?
well, again, talking to you, I rededicated myself to it. It took a while because again, different partnerships that I've had, different businesses. But this one in particular, the name of it is Madison and State.
Mhm.
And we all know in Chicago what Madison and State means, just the intersection of the city. But I just thought like so many things convene at that point in the city. But overall, we just focus on, the hats, the shirts. We didn't get into the denim.
Oh, that's great.
Um,
That's great.
be-
I mean,
because it was so many people in denim, and it was actually you were still in the denim at that time, and I'm like,
yeah,
hell,
we were only in denim. We were only
yeah,
in
I'm like, she got that locked. I don't want to do that,
yeah.
because jeans, that's a hard thing. But constantly being inspired by a conversation, I just stayed in that space, and we did well for the first 2 years.
Mhm.
And I got lax and I got arrogant, and now we're gonna redo some things. We took the website off, and we're gonna redo it. And instead of a .com, we're gonna do a .store because we
Mhm.
want to add a few other things. But long story short, as it's been long. But you just was an inspiration, like right off the back, and I just want to give you like a virtual hug
I
and just
appreciate that.
tell you, like your words were not unfound.
I appreciate that. And if I can give any advice on the clothing industry, I never made anything. Like we were more at like the third party, but staying super focused, going back to traction. We tried to go into shirts at some point before we even saturated the market. And one of the shiny object syndromes I see a lot of founders early stage when you don't have enough resources, because we see founders doing this where they'll think their competitors are really large players in the market like Amazon. I'm like, oh honey, they're not your competitors. They don't even think about you. It's really saying the way Amazon got to where they got is what's their books. And we always ask founders, what are your books? So I would really just stick with one or two or few things that you do well. We stayed in denim. We tried to do shirts and we realized it distracted us and we got rid of it. And then once we stayed on shirts, we looked at how can we do that the best. and then get our distribution down. So whether that was B2B relationships, but try to find 1 or 2 things you do really well, better than anybody else. That helps you grow any company, especially in clothing.
Thank you, Alex, for that pearl of wisdom yet again. I think that's a good place to end it for tonight. Where can our not listeners? I'm used to podcast hosting. Where can everyone on the line tonight in the workshop? Where can they learn more about Get Shit Done? And if they have any follow-up questions, how can they get in touch?
Yes, you can go to our website. Actually, while I've been on this call, and why I almost forgot, is our merch actually launched while we've been on this call. So 7:45 our time, I'm East Coast. So probably 20 minutes ago, it just launched on our website. So you can go check out our website, see what we do. We do specifically focus on supporting women founders. And the thing that yes, Tracy, love it. The thing that we care the most about is moving them through the pipeline. So 100% of our merch, including this, fuck 4%, that's our motto, is we have potty mouths for sure. But it's potty mouths with a purpose. But 100% of purchases go towards funding our founders through scholarships to our programs, and then also grants. So I'll put in the chat, you all can check it out and check out the work we do in general on our website. And then I'm on LinkedIn. I blab a lot there. I'm happy to chat. I suck at DMs, so it might be sitting there for a while. It's a wild west in my DMs, and it takes me a minute to get to them. But happy to support in any way I can. Thanks so much for having me. Hope you all have an amazing rest of your week.
Thank you, Alex. Everybody, give her some love in the chat with the
Thanks,
emoji
everyone.
applause or actual applause.
Yes,
this was awesome. We'll get the recording out to everybody through the email. And thank you for helping everybody here make sure that Q4, regardless of how good Q3 was, Q4 is going to go better than Q3.
You're going to kill it. Q4, like, this is like, you're at the end, you're Hail Mary, like Heisman it, you can just go hard. So you can only go hard if you get focused though. So get focused on where you can put the most effort.
Awesome. We'll see you everyone next month. It's a shorter month because of Thanksgiving. So our event next month is on November 16th. And you actually might be able to register for that one already, but check out startupgrind.com/Chicago for the latest details. Appreciate y'all. Thanks for being here tonight with us.